Welcome back everyone. In this lesson, we are going to begin scripting inside of Unity to set up our new editor window. And this editor window is going to allow us to generate AI images and save them to our Unity project, okay? A great way if you want to just generate some quick assets for your games inside of the editor. So to begin, we need to create our script, which is basically going to contain all the code for initializing and using this editor window. Now, before we do that, a quick refresher on what an editor window is. Pretty much everything we see on screen right now is in some way an editor window, okay? We've got the hierarchy, the project window. I have the animation window here tabbed, but we can just close that like so. Console, inspector, these are all windows, okay? And we can go up to the window drop down here at the top, and you can see that there are a large number of windows that Unity has built in by default, okay? So we can go animation, animator, and that can open up the animator window right here. Now we are essentially creating our own custom window that can be docked here inside of the Unity editor, but we are going to basically fill it with our own functionality, okay, for generating AI images. So how do we actually do that? Well, that is done by creating a script which represents a window, and then inside of that, we can basically set up the UI and set up the functionality for that UI. So to begin, I'm going to right click down in the project browser, go create C# script, and I'm just going to call this one generative AI, and we can then hit enter to create that script right there. Okay, so here we are. Now, inside of this script, we need to do a few things to set this up. First of all, we're going to delete the start and update functions, since this isn't going to be a component or a script we attach to a game object. So the start and update functions are basically going to be meaningless. So we're going to delete those like so. And second of all, we are then going to be adding in some new libraries up here. First of all, we want to be using the Unity editor library to access the editor window. We then want to be using OpenAI to access the OpenAI package. And a couple more, we want to be using UnityEngine.UIElements. Now, the UI elements library is what is going to allow us to build our UI, setting up our buttons, our input fields, displaying the images, and choosing how those are laid out inside of the window. That's what we're using here. We can also be using Unity Editor.UIElements, as that also has some UI elements that are a bit different. We then want to be using UnityEngine.Networking. We're using this in order to actually download the images from the web once we have basically generated them. We then want to be using System.Threading.Tasks, and this is for when we start looking at multi-threading and waiting for tasks to be completed. We'll have a look at what this is going to be used for a bit later on. And then finally, we want to be using System.io, and this is basically going to allow us to save the images to our computer. Okay? Now, once we have all those libraries initialized here, which are quite a few actually, we can go down to our class. And the first thing we are going to do is change the basically parent class here that we are inheriting from. Now, by default, it's monobehavior, which means we can attach this to a game object, but we are going to replace this with editor window. Okay, so we are now extending from the editor window class. Now, what we then need to do is make it so we can actually open up this window, okay? We need to make this an actual window that we can open up inside of Unity. And to do that, we are going to create a static function here. So we're going to create a public static void, and we can call this pretty much whatever we want. I'm just going to call this show my editor. And this function here, we need to add an attribute to it. So an attribute is basically, we can do that with 2 square brackets, and then we're going to go menu item. And then inside of these parentheses, we basically need to give it a path, okay? So pretty much, we are just going to go tools/generative AI. Now, what this means is, in a second I'll show you, but first of all, let's actually initialize the window. So basically, when we want to open up this window, we first of all need to get it. So we are going to create a variable here, which is of type editor window. We're going to call it window, and this is going to be equal to get window in angular brackets, the type, which is going to be generative AI. like so. So basically we are initializing a new generative AI window, and then we want to set the title content so it actually has a name. So window.title content equals new GUI content, and we are just going to call this one generative AI. Okay, so this function right here, it may look a bit odd, but let's see it in action. So we're going to save this, we're going to return to Unity. Now, you remember that inside of the menu item, we had tools/generative AI. This is basically the path at the top menu here that is going to link to that Windows creation. So you can see here, we have a little tools drop down, and if I click on that, we can click generative AI, and that is going to open up this window right here. Okay, so we now have our brand new window inside of Unity, and just like with all the others, we can move it around, we can dock it, we can resize it, we can, pretty much play around with it just as if it was a normal Unity window. We can then close it, go tools, generative AI to open it up again. Now that's pretty cool, but at the moment we don't really have anything inside of it. So what we need to do now is set it up so that we can start having some UI be displayed inside. And that is what we're going to be working on in the next lesson. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then. Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at how we can start to actually put some UI inside of our editor window right here, because right now you can see it's pretty empty. There's literally nothing inside of it. So how can we start having text, buttons, input fields, images, and all of that good stuff? Well, let's hop over into the script right now and we'll have a look at how to do that. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a brand new function, and this is going to be called public void create GUI. Now this is a built-in function to the editor window class right here, so make sure you do spell it in the correct way, and it should actually highlight blue. So this function basically gets called whenever the window is initialized or if the script is recompiled, okay? So basically, whenever we want to generate the UI, this function is going to be called automatically. So inside here, we need to basically define the UI elements and set them up. So the way we can do this is by using the UI toolkit, which Unity has built in, and this allows us to basically create things known as UI elements. Now, there are a large number of different UI elements: text fields, images, object fields, drop downs, scroll views, and all of that. But we're going to start simple. Let's just look at how we can have some text displayed inside of our editor window. And we can do this with what's known as a label. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new label variable here. We're just going to call this one test, and this is going to be equal to a new label. Okay, and if we initialize it with these parentheses here, you can see that there is a second option which contains a string. So for example, we can say this is a test label, like so. We save that. Now if we go back into the editor, you'll notice it'll recompile, but nothing will happen, okay? Our text isn't being displayed inside of our window. Now, why is that happening? Well, the reason why is because even though we are creating the label inside of the function that it should be created in, it's not being added to the visual element, okay? And that is sort of the way that these things work, is that we have, you can sort of think of it as like a tree of elements. And we right now have created a label, but we have not attached it to the tree just yet. So what we need to do is inside of the script here, we need to go root visual element, and this is basically the root of all the UI elements that are contained inside of this window, okay? And we want to get our root visual element dot add, and we want to add the test label to that, okay? So now if we save this and go back inside of the editor, you should see here that it is going to appear, and there we go. This is a test label. So that's working just great. Now, as well as this, we can also have buttons. So for a button, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new button variable right here. We'll just call this one our test button. And this is going to be equal to a new button, like so. Now, with this button, you'll see that the constructor has either nothing in it, or it has a event. It has an action event that we can link. But we're not going to do that just yet, so we're just going to leave it empty for now. And then we can go root visual element dot add test button. Okay. But one thing you may notice is that if we then go back into the editor, the button is not really going to exist because it has no text, so it's very thin, okay, and it doesn't really have much content. So what we can do is go back into the script here, and for this button, we can then go test button dot text equals, and then we can say, for example, test button. All right, we'll just call it that for now. And this is basically us giving the button a name. So we can save that, go back inside of Unity, and we should then see that this button is going to have some text, okay? And we can then click on that, but nothing happens. But if we did want something to happen, we could, of course, just link an event or a function here inside of the button constructor, and that will then call the respective function. Now let's look at how we can actually perhaps connect this button up to a function, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new function down here, and this one is just going to be called test, or we'll just call onClick test button, okay? So this is the function that's going to be called when the test button is clicked. And in here, we can just go debug.log button was clicked, okay? Now, in order to connect this function to the test button, inside of the button constructor here, you can see that there is a system action. And if your function that you're connecting it to has no parameters, then we can just simply go ahead and enter in the onClick test button function like so. We can then return to the editor, and once it has compiled, we can click it, and you should see down here in the console, we have that message being displayed, okay? So we're starting to get some UI elements added, we're starting to have some functionality. Now in the next lesson, before we actually jump into designing our UI and setting it all up, we're actually going to have a look at how we can send off a request to the OpenAI servers in order to get a response. Because once we have the basis of how to create UI elements and the basis of how to generate requests and get responses, we can then combine those together in order to develop our tool. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then in the next lesson.